Hi everybody, it's the Friday update, and for those of you who turned in papers, I think we got some interesting groupings, which should hopefully make the reading and giving each other feedback more fun um, and valuable. Both of those are important, and I think valuable is actually more important than fun. So for those of you who don't have fun, eh, it's worth the sacrifice to become a better writer. So my video will go here. I know it's nice sometimes to hear somebody else, and it's 3 minutes. So take 3 minutes or so, watch this. This will be have somebody else give you an idea of what he looks for in revision. And pretty much whenever you get English people talking, we'll all have our little flavors, but it's really all about cut, add, move, right? What do you need to cut because it doesn't belong? What do you need to move because the order is better in another way? And what do you need to add to make sure everything makes sense? And he goes through big picture paragraphs and sentences. Um, and and that's enough for that. So watch that. You'll also know exactly what I'm thinking in a couple minutes. Reread the healthy attitude towards my work, because this is not the time to start worrying about, if somebody criticizes my paper, are they criticizing me? No, unless they're a jerk. What they should be doing, and most likely are doing, is saying, this part doesn't make sense to me. Thank you. You need that if you're not being clear. And then you can typically, as you talk out or type out what you're trying to say, you'll get that clarity that you need, right? So it's really important that as you're reading somebody's paper that you don't do this Minnesota nice crap where you're like, you read it, you know it doesn't make sense, and you go, that was nice. No, it wasn't, right? If somebody has something you don't understand or you think it is wrong, it is your ethical duty to say, I don't understand this. I think it would be better if you did that. That's your responsibility. The writer's responsibility is to listen respectfully and then decide if they want to do it or not, right? Just as somebody says, this paragraph doesn't make sense to me, you might be darn sure that they're just not paying attention and you leave it. That's always your choice. You can always say, thank you. And then they never know what you turn in, right? It's not about that. It's about giving everybody the opportunity to say, I don't get this. I like that. This could be stronger. And then the person writing it gets to say, thank you. I'll use some of it. I'll ignore some of that. All right. The groups. So I want you to go here, right? Go into the groups and submit your paper, right? So if you're Alexa, L, or Ian, or Mel, you'd go in here, post your paper, then you're going to read everybody. So do this right away, right? Make sure you get posted to give everybody time to read your paper, right? And they have addiction, mass incarceration, some academics, and Big Brother. I thought that was kind of a neat, these two totally, you don't, these groupings, they might be interesting, right? And don't worry about, this person does not have to write about that, right? But I think it's interesting that as you're thinking about mass incarceration and so much of this is drug related, kind of interesting to see what's going on with addictions, right? And then of course, mass incarceration and Big Brother and academics, which can tie into addictions and all just big systems. So enjoy everybody. And then when we get to Ashlyn, Myron, Kylie, and Rama, and even if your paper's not fully done, right, put it there, let people say it, ask for suggestions. We got a couple different papers looking at something about Christianity, maternity leave, and personal fulfillment. If you think about roles and values and how to live and what's important, all of those can roll in together. One thing too, just make sure that in all of this, right, including the congenital heart defects, invasive species, self-segregation, and doggy evolution, there's more of the scientific group. Your job isn't to convince anybody necessarily that you're right, right? Like this is what the answer is. No, your job is to say this situation is complicated and here's the multiple angles of it. So your job is to convince us you have looked at your topic from more than one angle, right? And done that fairly. Think about the different taste buds, right? There's different ways of evaluating something. All right. So those are the groups. If you're still writing your paper, if you get it done, I should say when you get it done, send me an email, right? After you turn the paper in, because I check emails more than I come back and check the right here. Send me an email that said, hey, Steve, I finished the paper, and then I will add you, right, to a group. Right? Okay. Now, homework, post your paper, read the people's in your group, and give them feedback. Talk about the feedback in a minute. Now that your paper has a rough draft done, you can begin working on your presentation. And what that could look like now is going through, opening up this handout, right, and start filling it out. If I'm doing congenital heart defect, what are the key terms that I need? If I'm talking about Christianity, which Christian group am I talking about? The denomination? Are there certain terms that need to be defined? Invasive species, etc. You get the idea. What are the terms that the average reader might not know that they need to, right? Top pieces of background information, right? Your sources, 3 things you've learned. Now, this is about doing research, right? So not your topic. And then here's where you put key ideas from your topic. Now, because you're going to revise your paper, some of this may change, but you can definitely start thinking, and this can even help organize your thoughts, filling this out. So when it comes to your presentation, and there'll be a lot more about this next week, here's a list of things you can add to your presentation so it's not, boring. I am writing about invasive species. Invasive species are, say, for example, a fish that comes from someplace else and invades the other species. Yes, that is a problem. You can look through this and see different ideas. Like maybe you can ask a couple questions, right? Get people thinking about it. You could have some of these things are for in-person presentations, but then you just modify them. If it says bring in an object, well, you can't do that, but you can bring in a picture of that object, right? Or you could bring in a video and say, this, blah, 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 the object, which is one of the bigger Sharpies you'll ever see. Look at that. We'll talk more about it next week. This is how, going forward, you have access to both Zoom and PowerPoint, and this will be if you have a better system for, hey, Steve, I can make this on my own, people will be able to see it, cool. But this video will walk you through an easy way to use the technology I know that you have or have access to, because every student has a Zoom account through the college, and every student has free access to Microsoft Office, which has PowerPoint. So that'll show you how you can do that. All right. You've turned in your paper into, well, everybody's turned it in, right? Turned it into the Dropbox. Now you've posted it here. And you have probably 3 other people's. You might get a 4th paper if somebody turns something in late. What are you going to do? Well, the first thing I want you to do is just go over the basics, right? I would just open that document up, scan down it, and ask yourself the MLA stuff. Does the header look exactly like yours? Of course, your name's different. If you have 1 May 2020 and somebody else has May 1st, 2020, one of you is wrong. So look at the person's paper. If it's not exactly like yours, the header, somebody's wrong, right? Does the title look like yours? If it doesn't, somebody's wrong, right? If somebody's bolded and the other person isn't bolded, one of you is wrong. And by wrong, I mean MLA says do it this way. There's a ton of other ways to do it. You're showing me, hey, Steve, I get it. We're in the academic world. I'm going to jump through certain hoops, like making sure the title is regular font, not in bold, not in italics, etc. Does their page numbers look exactly like yours? Does the in-text citations, if they're short ones, look like your short ones? That's good. If their long one doesn't look like your long one, someone's wrong. Does their works cited page, oops, I got to add the cited in there, look exactly like yours? If your works cited is underlined and theirs isn't, somebody's wrong, and it's actually you with the underline. So really easy, scan down it and see what looks different than yours. And then you can just have a discussion, say, hey, I thought it was this. Write it down, let them know, and or then just go to yourself and look at all the MLA documents, scroll down and see them and say, yep, nope, it's this. You need to fix that. So that is I'm not going to call it that's the critical thinking but important formatting look, right? And just get that out of the way. And then now you can, for this part, you are playing one of those things is not like the other, right? Once you've done that, now you can turn on that more analytical, critical side of your brain and look at the introduction. Go back over our handouts. Oh, you can always go back to videos too that were posted, right? But does it follow the guidelines? If you read this and you're bored, you know it didn't hook your attention. If you read this and you're like, how did you get to a thesis on scissors when all of your quotes were about a bowling alley, right? It's like, wait, what's the connection? So, as far as I know, nobody's written about scissors or bowling alleys. I was just trying to come up with an example that won't make somebody think I'm calling them out, right? So look at the introduction. How well does it grab our attention, set the stage, and end with a thesis? If you look at that last line of the introduction and you're like, is that a thesis? Put in your feedback. I'm not sure your thesis is in the right spot or if that's a thesis. All right. When it comes to the body, right? Does it use a variety of paragraph types? And oops, I will put, I'll put the link to that handout that was from before, right? The different types of paragraphs and how you can use them, narrative, process, etc. They don't have to use all of them, right? But it can help you if you're reading somebody's paper and you're like, something's not just right here. One of the things you can think of is what's going on. Maybe they just give you expert quote after expert quote after expert quote. Then you can go back and say, hey, wait a second. Why don't you try telling us the process of how invasive species come to be, right? How mass incarceration, Big Brother, you name it, right? Does every paragraph have a clear topic sentence that covers everything in the paragraph? If it doesn't, let them know. Does the topic sentence relate to the thesis? If it doesn't, let them know, because the thesis, every topic sentence should relate to the thesis. If it doesn't, the thesis needs to change or that paragraph might have to go away. And then look at, right, look at the order, right? Is this paragraph, would it be better if something at the end was in the beginning? Or say, for example, in your paper, this is one that pops up a lot. Somebody will start talking about something and then define it later on. It's like, no, no, no. Define it first, then talk about it. That helps with our understanding. When you get to the conclusion, right? Does it summarize, restate the thesis in a new way? After you've read 2,000 words, or by that time, right, you've probably read 1,600, you don't need to cut and paste the thesis and say it exactly the same. Your reader is more informed, so you can summarize, restate the thesis in a new way, knowing that they've read the whole paper, right? So they have more details. Does it have any new information, which is a no-no? If they say, and by the way, this is, nope. Tell them move the new information back into the body, line it up with a paragraph that needs it, or maybe it just gets cut. Does it connect back to the introduction, right? Is there something, if you mention that quote from pick your person, are you referring back to the quote? If you had that startling statistic, do you mention that? Anything that makes us feel, yes, it's connected to the beginning, we must be at the end, and that's also tied to sense of closure. And don't forget, you've got the handout right there. And as soon as I finish this video, I'll put the link for the different paragraph types so you do not have to go hunt for them. All right. That's the plan, right, for the weekend. If you have questions, make sure to send them as emails. That's the best way. And I think that's it. Enjoy reading your fellow students' papers. Plan on spending some time on each person's paper. And there's two things that you make this a little smaller. You could have a Word document out and then, right, break it down into categories if you wanted to, MLA, right? Make a list. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And then, you could cut and paste that, put that in the document. That's one way to do it. The other thing you could do is bring up their paper, right? Say, here's their, open up their document. This is from a different class, different paper assignment. But you could open it up and then, look, oh, that looks good. If you see something, right? Like say, for example, this person had their bold in right? This in bold, right? You could do something like take out of bold, right? And then, so you could read it wherever you have a suggestion, you can put it in here. And for those of you who have been using this a while, review, there's a track changing option. I don't want to dump in on at this late game something too new. If you YouTube it, and it depends if you're using Word or Office, doing this would be fine, right? Just know too, if you want to spend 5 minutes on Google, you can find out YouTube, you can find out a way to make it more color coded, right? As you read it, you can put in the feedback here, and you just want to make sure that they can see it, right? So, you know, maybe I do an XX, need to explain more, and I'll spell it right. So anyways, one thing, if you do, oh, and you know what? I am going to throw this out there as an option. If you put an X before everything you see, X, need to explain, right? X by itself, X, have to revise, blah, 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 blah. If you do that and let the person know, hey, check for X's, they can go home, find X, it'll show up in the results, right? So on the spot suggestion for everybody, if you're going to print out their copy, use the XX wherever you put out, right? See, now you have to move the thing to the start when you do a search again. Search pause. We don't want it paused. Right now, you notice you have both of those. So, and you'll even get to see where you're at. So if you're not going to make a list and type everything up, I like this version because you're right there in the paper. They'll see everything it is. And then the trick is when you're done, now you have to save it. Save it as, you know, my feedback for Joe's paper. And then you upload that to the discussion. Okay. Got any questions? Let me know. And that's the work, right? So close. Keep your foot on the gas. We are almost done, right? Basically, we're down to about 10 days. So you can do it. I hope you have a good, productive weekend, and I'll see you next week.